Hey everybody, Bernakevitch here with All Points Design, allpointsdesign.ca. The man who just had a and is looking incredibly dapper for so early in the morning is Dan Palmer of Very Edible Gardens, Holistic Decision Making. There's wicking beds. I look at your signature and I think I've got 3 websites. I'm doing fine compared to all the websites and the projects you're involved with, but my incredible co-host today is Dan Palmer. Dan, thanks so much for joining me.
Absolute pleasure, Javan. Great to be here.
We're putting on a bit of a show right now to make it look like we're far more professional than we actually are, because Dan and I, for the last 8 months now, I was going to say 6, but I feel like it's actually closer to 8, have been video pen pals. We have been talking across the world, across multiple ponds, because we found we have many common interests. We have a lot of nerding out on a number of areas, far more than I would have thought of with other regenerative designers, in terms of loving about watersheds and talking about composting human manure. But one of the things that Dan and I connect most about is decision making, broad mind landscape conversations, because years ago, when I got into learning about holistic management through my friend Gord Hebert, he said, you have to read this series of 3 articles put out by Very Edible Gardens on the PRI Permaculture Global site. And I read through them and I was spellbound by how simplistically the author, the esteemed Dan Palmer, had put it. Although I have to say the facial hair at that time was fantastic in those videos. Just like bar none fantastic. I hope you leave them up forever. Dan had decoded, and I say decoded because sometimes the language that's used when describing some of the context work, which is one of these words that we'll decode in a second, but the context work of holistic management seemed a little bit either too focused on landscape or just inaccessible. But Dan had decoded holistic context, which is essentially a way to set your priorities and make better decisions, into a very accessible format. And so over these 3 articles, which we'll link to, I learned an incredible tool. And then instead of reaching out and saying, Dan, thanks so much for teaching this to me, I went running and started playing with it. And then, what was it, Dan? 8 months ago, you saw some of my work and reached out very generously and said, oh my God, I love what you're doing, instead of, I can't believe you stole my sandbox and my tools. And I think it's been a bromance since then, like an intellectual, holistic context, regenerative landscape bromance. Not to mention, I think we just geek out a lot. It seems that way, at least. So one, thank you from the bottom of my heart. You've introduced something to me and to a number of people that I've worked with, now over 560 people this week, into context. And 2, I hope we're having this conversation when we're 90.
Yeah, me too, man.
So let's paint a little bit of this photo for folks. You know, we talk about holistic context. What's your bumper sticker for folks when they say, what is holistic context, or your branding of it, holistic decision making? What's like the simple conversation that anybody can understand?
Yeah. So, well, recently I've been putting it as there's either 3 or 4 chunks. So getting clear on what you really want, getting clear on where you are, making decisions that take you from one to the other, and getting yourself back on track when you get on track, off track, because you will. That's one way I've been putting it. What about you? What's your current executive summary?
What's my executive? What's the tagline? What's the bumper sticker? I think it's actually more, I haven't been able to reduce it to a sentence yet that anybody I talk to can understand. So I give them the 2 or 3 sentence, which is, when people call me as a land designer, they'll ask me, I want the farm. And I'll ask them, why do you want the farm? And they'll say things like, I want to be close to the land. I want to grow incredible food. I want my kids to grow up in a place that I know is safe. I say, that's really interesting. Those are qualities you want to have true about your life. And there are many ways to ensure that happens without a farm. Let's talk about the issues of owning a farm. What inherently do you feel is frustrating about owning a farm? And they'll say, well, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I have the right tools or the right mindset. I don't know if I have the money. And that immediately puts them into the mental framework of, wait a second, maybe the goal in my head isn't going to be the quality of life. And then I say that society, so maybe I do have it, society has conditioned us, definitely me and for a number of folks, to say, have the thing and the thing will create the quality of life. The problem is that the thing usually creates a sacrifice of the quality of life. And so you end up with neither. You strive for the goal, you don't reach the goal, and you've also lost the quality of life. And for anybody that's tried farming, for anybody who's tried homesteading, they know that they lose a lot of sleep, they lose a lot of mental clarity. Food is not a foregone conclusion of farming or homesteading. It's definitely a desire, but you can screw it up pretty easily, pretty quickly. So just that thinking of having quality of life over goals instead of goals over quality of life, for me, has been the way that I've been able to introduce it to folks at the gym, friends and family. And when I iterated that in this really short explainer video I put together, my aunt called me, who is a 35-year-old veteran of trauma, ER, and neuro nursing, and said, I finally understand what you do. And when I asked her, what is it I do? She says, you allow people to put themselves first. So I find that's always great. Like, ask the family, explain it to the family, and then ask the family, what is it do I do? Because the family wants to know what you do.
Yeah.
But they're in their own context, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's been my answer. And I think the other thing that I really enjoy is just that idea of better decisions, is that I feel like I was never taught how to make good decisions. And I've made a ton of bad decisions. And context is one of these tools, just like when you learn how to properly use a knife, you make better food because your focus and the abilities around it build. I don't know if you've found that with clients and helping them with decision making, if the tool actually results in better holistic thinking or conversations.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And that's so exciting to get to that level with folk where it starts to spill out sideways. And it, like, often I introduce it to people as a tool. It's a tool. It's another tool. It's a life tool. It'll support you in your farming project, or possibly your family, or your living your own life. It's another approach. But over time, what it's become for me is an invitation, a different way of being alive, and just a different orientation, a different way of framing the kind of point of anything and how you go about anything. As you were talking, I was thinking about an attempt at a shorter bumper sticker one, which was something along the lines of supporting folk, including myself, to get out of standard kind of ruts and move into the space of full aliveness and fulfillment, and some ways of practically getting into that kind of space. It'll be maybe if it'd be fun to share too. You mentioned about the goals, and realizing the goals are often contradictory or not resulting in quality of life, or we're not achieving the goals. I've been introducing this and starting off workshops and stuff with a very similar framing. Maybe I could share.
Please.
Your feedback on. So, yeah, I'll often start by saying, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a couple of different ways of thinking about the relationship between three different words. First word is goal. So we talk about goals, and I pull some examples out of the group. I'm thinking of actual things people have said. I want a dog, or I want to go and watch the cycle race in Spain next year, or I want to retire within 5 years, or I want to take the net profit of my business to 300,000. Blah, blah, blah. So the specific achievements you want to reach in the future. We've all got them. We've all got goals. And so we got these goals. Some of them we choose. Sometimes we unconsciously get them from outside. And of course, that's what advertising is. Advertising is attempting to insert goals into people. So one way or another, you're walking around with this grab bag full of goals. And now you start to try and achieve your goals. And the first thing that happens, is the universe chucks a whole lot of barriers or blockages or obstacles in between you and your goals. We call those problems. We've all got them. So you've got problems, you've got goals. And most of us, or conventionally in our culture, most of us, I would say, spend most of our time trying to achieve goals and trying to solve problems. And for me, the the tantalizing invitation of holistic decision making starts with the observation, it's only been this clear for me for a month or two, and it's still kind of sinking in. But okay, on the one hand, we spend most of our time chasing goals and solving problems. On the other hand, we could solve all of our problems and we could achieve all of our goals and still not have what we want, and still not have a life that brings us alive, and still not experience deep fulfillment. You know, we could achieve every single goal we've got, we could solve every problem we've got, and we're still not we're still in the space of quality. And I'm finding these days I'm able to share that with folk in a way where, you know, to some degree it lands like, all right, because, you know, you think what? Tell me about your day, tell me about your week, and most of it's made up of setting and striving toward goals and solving problems. And the upshot is, for this third phrase or word, quality of life, is that it's pretty hard. It's not a very good strategy for taking you to quality of life, because, as you said, often the goals end up taking you another direction. Often we have goals that are contradictory or mutually exclusive. So they literally tear us apart. You know, we have goals to do with family, goals to do with work, and you know, it's like it's effectively, life ends up being like you're on a torture rack. You're literally being torn apart. And then another part of it is realizing that we've been brought up in a reductionistic, mechanistic culture where we unconsciously construe the kind of way of achieving anything as choosing parts and assembling them into a meaningful whole. And so a lot of the parts in life are goals and problems, you know, they are parts. And so, we've all got them. We've all got these goals and problems. And a lot of what we're trying to do is bring them together along with the things we do, which is, you know, everything you do is a part of your life, obviously. How do I bring all these parts together to create a meaningful whole? And quality of life is about wholeness. It's about the feeling of the whole. And it doesn't work. We end up with these kind of awkward, gangly assemblages. Some of the parts don't really belong. A lot of them contradict each other. And for me, holistic decision-making is saying, let's flip the whole thing on its head. Let's start with the whole. What health and vibrance and fulfillment of the whole looks like, and that, which is what we also call quality of life, which is literally defining what's important for you or your business or your farm, what's supremely important. And now we have that. Let's move from the whole toward the parts and only choose and let in the parts that serve the whole and serve a beautiful shape and flavor and pattern and configuration of the whole, starting with goals. So now, rather than saying, well, we've got goals, we're going to run into problems, and oh shit, quality of life sucks, we say, now we're clear on what quality of life is. Let's use that to choose or choose goals based on the extent to which they are eligible to take us toward quality of life. And that always involves pruning a lot of goals that we've probably already got, getting them out of the way, realizing that they're obstacles themselves. And then now we move back into the chaos of everyday life and all the complexities we all face every day. And we reframe problems, where problems aren't things to solve, because the whole mentality is a problem is something I want to make go away. So spending my life trying to reduce things, eliminate things, turn them down, to saying, here, this problem is an opportunity to turn up something that I value, which is quality of life. So I'm clear on these goals. These goals are going to take me toward quality of life, and that may change. I need to be vigilant and get rid of them or modify them as appropriate. But here I am. I'm in the middle of a problem, whereas in the past, the idea would be if I could make it go away, that would be a good outcome. Whereas here we go. Case in point, you're not a problem at all. One of my beautiful children. I haven't really probably said good morning to. But what we get into is a space where how can I use the opportunity of this problem? The opportunity this problem represents as a stepping stone, as a point of traction or friction that I can use to move toward the goal, which I know is taking me toward quality of life. Okay, I've got to talk to Javan now. I'm going to talk to Javan now. Would you mind popping through? That wasn't a problem.
Not at all.
That was a little injection of quality of life.
I think what I like about context and what I've found to be so infinitely useful is that, one, I was never taught to think in those terms. I was never taught to think in terms of creating the boundary conditions about what I wanted life to look like after the fact and during the fact and before the fact. And to turn the facts, to turn the goals, to turn the moments inside out, and to say, what's the vessel look like? And then finding the pieces to fill the vessel, instead of saying, okay, I've got water, let's find a vessel to put it into. And the way visually I've explained it a few times is, you know, two sort of Venn diagrams, one being context, and then saying how much of your context actually currently overlaps with your goals. And a lot of it doesn't. A lot of the context, when you finally say, well, I just finished working with this couple who wanted to hire me to help them find a place to live. So they were finally ready. It came through another consultant on your side of the world who knew these folks, and they said, you got to talk to Javan. So the first call I had with the gentleman, the husband of the husband-wife combo, was, oh, it's great. Super happy to help you guys find a piece of land. We have to start with context. And he said, what do you mean? So, well, I have to first understand what you want this land to be about. He's like, well, I want a monkey puzzle tree. I want a place where I can fly my drone. She wants a place to be able to put her equipment, her outdoor equipment. I said, that's great. What do you want to have your land produce for you in terms of how you are within that space? And maybe it's not even land, maybe it's a houseboat. And all of a sudden he goes, a houseboat, huh? And that was that crack. It was that moment that allows us to start to speak about that conversation. And as we started to delineate their context, we got down into the weeds really quickly. They got into the weeds of each other, because as soon as you're with a partner saying, I want this in terms of a quality of life, I want to be able to host my family and host them well. And the other partner is saying something to the effect of, I want to have a sense of freedom, which of course then creates a lot of conversations about the detail of what that means. You find those overlaps and those friction points between the two boundary conditions between the two individuals. And so I got this fascinating email that said, hey, there's some bigger meta conversations about context that we have to take care of. We need a couple of months. And I said, I may be overstepping my bounds, but does this have to do with the fact that you guys are having some interpersonal friction? And if so, here's a bunch of reviews of folks who I've worked with on that, just to give you a sense that I have the eligibility to touch those types of problems. And if you want, we can have a short conversation. They said, yeah, super intuitive. You haven't stepped on any toes at all. Let's have a conversation. And we did. And it was about taking another step back and saying, in terms of the relationship context, what's truly important? Being right or being close? And that question changed the entire conversation. They said, yeah, we want to do more work on that. I got really sick at that point. I actually wasn't even able to respond to their email of, yeah, let's do a bunch of sessions. And instead they took that one comment and worked out their problems to the point to where they could continue to work out their problems. It's not like we worked them out and they're done, but we know how to interact when friction comes up, because friction is a part of living in the universe. And I don't mean like the meta universe. I just mean elements that rub together have friction, be they people or places or plows, doesn't matter. And what's so interesting is at the end of the conversation, which we just finished a couple of weeks ago, they said, we're so surprised where we ended up. That's what she was saying. I'm so surprised where we ended up. I feel like we have a sense of what the future looks like without even knowing what the land looks like. And so they've already discounted the place I was supposed to find the land in the area. They discounted that just wholesale. This is not the place for us. Saved themselves thousands of dollars, just hundreds of thousands of dollars, because their context didn't include this specific area, to which then I was able to come in with specific land consultation information and say, here are the 3 areas I would suggest you start to play with. And then save the money from my consultation fees to say, you already know how to shortlist at this point, and you can then bring those shortlists to me to further shortlist them once I know that they've met your context. And I'll challenge you, which I've already done once. I'll challenge you and really ask you hard questions, but then I can take it from a land design conversation in terms of what the shorthand goals that they've actually proved, and go through and say, you have the water for this, you don't have the sun for this. This will take up a huge amount of work. And it feels like to me, and I want your opinion on this, it feels like to me this whole teach a person to fish, they can fish for themselves for years. It's almost like 3 steps back from that, and teaching them the laws, teaching individuals the laws that govern fish and water and climate, not even teaching them how to fish, but teaching them the laws around that and giving them, you know, I'm big into video games, and I've recently been playing this video game which talks about immersive tutorials, that there's tutorials within the game that teach you. You don't have to take the tutorial, which is true of life, but it feels like holistic life context for me, holistic decision making for you, better decision making for me in terms of the terms we use, is like an immersive tutorial on life, of like how to play with life in a way that really, you set the metrics, you set what the score is being tallied, and then you also are able to achieve it, instead of taking the score box from everybody else, like collecting all these coins. It's so funny, I'm just going to go right for it and use all the video game metaphors. Collecting all these coins is actually the point, when you realize the point of the game is actually not collecting the coins, it's the journey, it's the felt experience, it's what you take out of it. Anyways, I could go much further, and I've talked for enough, but like, how have you seen that in terms of response? Like, you've been doing some great work. Like, you just worked with 30 individuals in healthcare, which is of course completely
hospitality.
Oh, right, hospitality. That's outside of land design. So we're finding that this tool is trans or pan humanity, because, as Allan Savory so well put it, the problem is not tools for humanity. The problem is management, which is actually decision making.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and this stuff applies to any human being that makes decisions, which turns out to be the problem. Yeah, I love that way of framing it. This idea of supporting awareness in ourselves, and in our case, some of the folk we work with. Moving away from, it's not even teaching them to fish or teaching ourselves to fish. It's around gaining a better understanding of just how scales work, how water works, how the dynamics of the whole situation are at play. That's fantastic. Yeah, that was an experience. I was up in Brisbane yesterday. I got this phenomenal design brief or invitation that I couldn't turn down. So I'm partial to a challenge. And it was like, hey, I represent a group of 30 to 40 women who work in hospitality. Most of them own their own cafes. And so they're working in high stress, high urgency, lots of problems every day situations. And we're all feeling overwhelmed. And we'd like you to come and spend 4 hours with us and teach us about fishing, so to speak, And yeah, it was an amazing experience. And the one thing I'm doing now is I remember one in particular. I'll share one example. Is similar to yours. And let's generally, when you ask people what they want, they throw some goals at you. And so I had someone up, and she said her goal was to go down to work, to not working weekends ASAP, which is a goal. And you could tell it was a meaningful goal for her, but you could also, as I felt the energy of her body, it didn't have what I needed. It didn't have that depth of, it didn't have enough potency or intensity to support her to get there. And so it was like, okay, that's a beginning. That's the tip of the iceberg. Let's go deeper. So tell me more about that. What do you want to not be working weekends for anymore? And her answer was around, there's three things. So I just scratched this goal a little bit, and boof, it opened up into three directions. And two of them were starting to arrive at quality of life. One needed a bit more work. The first one was because I want to feel more rested. I'm not feeling rested. Okay. Another one was that I want to be experiencing more closeness with family. I'm missing out there. And as she spoke that, you could feel that was a real drive, and that was something that was core to critical life, to quality of life for her. The other one was I want to be exploring my own kind of, not hobbies, but creative outlets more. And as she said that, you could see, wow, there's something in her that quality of life is suffering because she's working all the time and she's not able to do. She didn't mention what it was, whether it was art or bushwalking or whatever. So those second two are great. But the first one, I realized it felt like more of a goal to me. So tell me more about that. You want to feel more rested, because I knew that that's not the end. That's the idea, is that if you're more rested, that's going to create something else for you. And asking her about that, she said, well, I want to feel like I'm making decisions that aren't being forced and that are are clearer or something like that. And we're like, okay, we could feel it in her. And we worked that a little bit, and she got there herself, moving from unforced to free is what she got to. So I then had her just share those 3 quality of life statements around creative outlets, around family, and around, it was something like I'm making decisions. I'm making decisions that are clear, and I'm making clear decisions freely, or something like that. And then, now we're starting to arrive somewhere, which was incredible, because of course you could say, okay, I'm going to set a goal, stop working weekends and start trying to achieve that goal. Quite possibly the structural dynamics of your life or her life in the cafe, with all the issues and problems and the goals the cafe has, would mean that she might try, she'd succeed for a few weekends and possibly fall back into the old patterns. Whereas tapping into, wow, hang on, this is what deep happiness, deep fulfillment means for me. These 3 things aren't negotiable. We'll see. It'd be good to stay in touch with her. But the idea is that, okay, I love this book by Robert Fritz called The Path of Least Resistance. And he talks about primary and secondary choices. And primary choices, for me now, are quality of life choices. I'm choosing to choose quality of life. So first I've got to figure out what the heck that is. And sometimes by scratching goals, that'll start revealing itself to me. And so a primary choice for her is, I'm creatively exploring these outlets. I'm experiencing abundance of quality time with family. I'm making decisions freely and clearly. If those are primary choices, it doesn't stop there. There's a responsibility of making secondary choices that are in service of the primary choices. And those are the day-to-day decisions. I choose I choose quality, therefore, in this moment, I choose to go think this way, this way, this way. I choose whatever's going to take me toward those. And so, yeah, it's been great to start moving outside my traditional domain of work, where it's a little scary and, a little different, and a little bit of a challenge, but finding again and again, because whenever I come up with ideas and ways of working with this stuff, the first thing I try and do is try and break them myself, and I invite others, what's wrong with this? And lately, I'm challenging myself in that space by saying, I'm working with a group of people I've never met, in an industry I don't know. Let's get one of them up, do some work together, and put my ideas like on the table, this way of working in front of everyone. Let's try and break them together. And so far, so good. I'm just going to share one other little example from yesterday. It was quite funny. I was trying to get someone else to share a problem, because I've just shared an example of how I often work with someone's goals, and we'll travel through the goal to quality of life so that we can prioritize that and then come back to choosing the right goals that serve it. The other way of getting there is through problems, because everyone's got those. And I was trying to get someone to share, and no one was sharing in that moment. So I was just looking at one person. This guy, he's a Luke Growers, beautiful market garden operation. And I sat down with him and said, so what's going on? He said, well, I got to the problem, but I haven't got to the quality of life. What's the problem? Oh, the problem is that ducks are eating my crops. Okay, all right. So tell me more. What crops are they? What's going on? Brussels sprouts. All right. Okay. So why is it a problem? Well, it's because I want to grow Brussels sprouts. So now we've gone from a problem, the ducks are eating my crops, to a little goal, right? I have a goal of Brussels sprouts, but of course, that's a goal. It's not quality of life. Growing Brussels sprouts does not equal quality of life. And so tell me more about that. What do you want to grow Brussels sprouts? And little conversation, and they ended up arriving at a lovely quality of life statement around that we're surrounded by and contributing to abundance, or something like that. And it was quite a lovely sequence from ducks to Brussels sprouts to abundance. Like, okay, now you're getting there, and as they spoke, his partner chipped in. You could see that was part of the reason they got into this in the first place. Yeah. So there's a few little reflections, but I love that way of it's even beyond teaching people to fish. It's setting them up so that they'll figure it out when the time comes.
One of the things that a client and colleague said to me after he used this process to proof a $500,000 decision to buy back 11 acres, I think it was 11 acres of land from the original family farm, which has a lot of emotional baggage to it, was that that having a context and this process of thinking, this process of decision making, made him consider and gave him the ability to be inoculated against is biases.
Yeah.
And that idea of inoculation, or that idea of shielding against our biases, to be able to see something clearly, right? To take the fog from the lenses, to take the inclinations, glasses that make you seem closer to the ground or further away. So you actually change the way your body is. To me, is a really interesting one. And one that you brought up with your Brussels sprouts conversation was that so many times when individuals go into anything, period, full stop, they go with it from programming or beliefs that are given to them that they adopt because they know nothing else. They haven't taken the time to think about it. George Bernard Shaw famously said, most people, think maybe once in their entire life, like really think, really sit down and really think about it. I've made a living through thinking deeply once a week. And that's it. When you think about that one statement, the amount of energy that goes into it is very little. And then similarly, when you think about this Brussels sprouts conversation, and I'm tying it together with a conversation I had with a group of young farmers here in Canada called the Young Agrarians, I was giving a key line design talk, and I started off with the concept of all of you have a belief about farming that does not fit your context and is costing you time, money, and energy. What's one of those beliefs you've already found, and what's one you're suspect of? And that question was great because they all said, oh, and they started bringing up all the things they thought were true and then implemented it into the land, which might be in your farmer's case, the fact that Brussels sprouts is not a good fit for their context. But they were bringing up all these incredible ideas. And then when I said what you're suspicious of, it was interesting because in these events, there's a lot of partnerships, be it relationship partnerships that are also working partnerships, or working partnerships that come, so 2, 3, 4 individuals. And it's always the same. They all look at each other because, it's the fox in the hen house they don't want to talk about. They're like, do we talk about that? Do we?
Yeah.
Or they're like, I know what it is for you. Because we're always so easy to see it in other people. But that concept, that context, even context thinking, the idea of thinking within context and form, gives people the ability to be emotionally secure and, again, inoculated. You're not proofed yet. And I don't think you're ever proofed. It's always an exercise. It's always a muscle to strengthen against those things that come up. My partner and I were just discussing the fact that the truck died a couple of days ago, and like the module that they need is $5,000 and it's $2,000. Like it's more than the cost of the vehicle. So we're going back and saying, okay, well, what's the vehicle that actually fits our context? And it gets heated, right? Because I'm thinking in context and he's thinking in, well, let's get the same vehicle. And I say, is that actually the best choice for what we need it to be, for the outcomes that we're looking for in terms of the sense of ability, which is the ability to facilitate the development of the site, the ability to get him back and forth, the ability, and even before that, the ability to service his work, right? So when you pull back the lens, it's one way to look at it, or when you take goals and then complex into quality of life, it's so interesting because it brings up, and I'm curious if this is your situation, it brings up emotions like nothing else.
Yeah, fully. Yeah, I share a little example. A couple of years back, we had a problem. We were trying out living in New Zealand, and we were living in a barn on my parents' place, big barn, and it was they just harvested the maize next door, the corn. So all the rats that lived in the maize, they were heading toward the barn, and it was turning to winter, so the barn was getting cold. It was a big, hard, warm space. And my mum lived in a house 50 meters away, which is great. But and I could see where she was coming from. My wife's perspective, it was time to have a little bit more distance between wife and mother-in-law. And it was going to be conducive to everyone's mental health, and etc. Anyway, so I got back from a bit of teaching, and my wife, very, I was going to say very, very articulately shared the problem with me with a little bit of emotion. We're moving. We're going to be starting somewhere else. And so we started this, which I got. Okay, let's talk about it. Where are we heading? How's this going to look? And a very standard dynamic emerged, which is she'd been reading about and kind of I want to say fixated, but she'd been fascinated by yurts as a structure for a long time. And here we are looking for a different living situation. And so she latched onto this idea of yurts, which she loves. So she said, why don't we get a yurt? This is a great opportunity to get a yurt. And so I hear this, and I don't have that attachment to yurts. And so I'm like, what, a yurt, really? I don't know. Like, we don't know a lot about yurts. They seem, like, how. She said, no, it'll be great. Like, it'll be amazing. We can, I think I made a point about it's just one room, right? So we're all in one room and kids and stuff and guests. And so, no, we'll get you 2 yurts and you can join and have a little, so what happened as the conversation started, where I was starting to find cons or negatives with her idea, her proposal to solve our problem, which she was attached to. And because she was into it, I just sort of, and because it didn't appeal to me for whatever reason, I started to find critiques and she started to find defenses and like, I don't know, is it a big space? It'll be hard to heat. She said, no, I've done the research. You can get these special flue kits so you can run a chimney through the yurt. And so it went, so she'd come up with a positive and negative, and there's emotions and we're fighting with each other. And it wasn't until I was like, hang on a second, this is not, there's another way to approach this. Let's forget about the yurt or the house bus or the renting the place or the buying the place. Let's forget about all the potential solutions to our problems. We're realizing that our human tendency is problem, run to solutions and start arguing about which solution. Let's step back and define quality of life for us for the next 6 months. What needs to be true of wherever it is we're going to live. Exactly what you were suggesting doing with the example of the truck. And so we just wrote a list. We wanted it to be flexible in the sense that we could relocate easily if we wanted to, because we're exploring the country. There was even specific things that were goals, but they were goals which fit within quality of life for that 6 months. Like, I needed fast internet for work, and we wanted bike rideable access to places of natural beauty, and not too far from family, further than 50 meters, but not further than 100 kilometers or whatever it was, and so on. So we wrote a list of criteria. I think it was 12 criteria. And that was a very harmonious conversation, because it's just like, let's talk about what matters to you, what matters to me, what matters for the kids for the next 6 months. And there's no need for pros and cons or critique and defense, right? Because like my wife is saying, look, this is really important to me. I need this. It needs to be, it needs to feel like it's our own space, was one of her things. It's not, I don't want to be living in my mother-in-law's place and receiving information about having to clean the oven or, and so on. And it's like, how can I can't critique that. I don't want to critique. It's like, they're great. And so on. So we had these 12 criteria, and then we came back to the potential solutions, and there was a bunch of those, and dropped them all through in this decision-making sense that I'm grateful to Savory for this idea that you can test decisions or drop them through a filter. And the filter is made out of the criteria you've established, which are all about taking you toward quality of life. So we dropped the yurt through, and we dropped various things through, and a house bus was on the list. It didn't seem like an option. There was about 10 items on the list, and the house bus made it through all 12 criteria. And so we went and bought a house bus, and it worked out. It was an amazing experience, even though down the track we made another decision. Well, first we made a decision to buy another house bus using this approach. And then the bigger decision of moving back to be here in Australia for this kids' school years and all that kind of stuff. But totally. It's great. And to acknowledge too that it's not, I'm constantly catching myself falling into these old dynamics. And here we go again. Let's step back. What do you really want here? Let's prioritize. A workshop participant once kind of had a light bulb moment when we were exploring this, and he said, I think I just got it. I've been living my own life without prioritizing my own happiness. He was just like, what the hell have I been doing? Been chasing goals, solving problems, and making myself miserable half the time. Like, what was I missing? How did I miss that memo? Yeah.
Well, I think a big part of that is that when we look at programming, an output or a result of that programming is busy is permissible, or busy can replace good. As long as you're occupied.
Keeping busy, good, great.
It's okay, right? How are you doing? Busy. Oh, great. That set of exchange has been most of what my education was about. What's good work? in Alberta.
Yeah.
And when I talk to my family, very much so. If I say busy, oh, that's great. Not fulfilling, not is it filling the coffers, not does it make you feel like you're doing good work, but busy equals good. And in Alberta, the province where I was born and raised, that's very much the case. You know, it's like Texas and Montana had a one night stand. It's just like bigger, better buck, lone rugged woodsman. If you can do it and do it quick, get her done. And that's been so interesting because I feel like I came from a context that was so about doing for doing's sake is important. And now I'm in the place where I've looked at that so intensely, that whole process of where I came and this conversation of what's important, that I am definitely not doing as much. But it also means that as an individual, that is an organic system. And I learned this from the aquaponics world, that aquaponic systems are run on an 80% capacity because they're living systems that are contained and they need to have ebb and flow. Where normally humans are running at 110, 120, 130 in terms of total percentage capacity. And when you drop it down to 80, when you drop it down to 60, when you drop it down to 50 or 60, like I had to because I was a bit sick recently, when I come up to this opportunity, which just happened, to having my brother call me up and say, hey, we should do a cinematography project together. Let's pitch for this documentary. I was able to go full out 14, 16-hour days to put this pitch together because I work at that capacity. If I was at 110, something would have broken. And you use a wonderful analogy, and I'll let you explain it further, but this analogy that within life, there are crystal balls and there are rubber balls. We're always juggling something. And we need to understand first what kind of juggler we are for what kind of balls, like how many we can keep going. And that if we drop a rubber ball, we can pick it back up, but a crystal ball is much more harder. And that's the fascinating thing about context, is context helps us to delineate what are the crystal balls, what are the rubber balls, and how do we want to juggle. And it's a wonderful way of giving the imagery and the metaphor of it. But at the same time, it's almost more than a metaphor, because it really does feel like there are some things that are just so valuable. And when I realized, not when anybody else, but when I realized the moments that I've dropped it, it's like, oh, just bonehead move, you know, like full face palm. Like, I can't believe I have actively been dropping crystal balls. And then when you really look at them again with the metaphor, like, these are chipped and I need to work to repolish, to re-add, to give effort into them. So that way they do feel full and whole and amazing into the future. And I just have to say, thank you so much for that analogy. That's been brilliant for me, and it's been brilliant for clients to see that.
I should acknowledge I got the idea from a book. It was called The One Thing. You know, it was one of these high selling kind of. There was hints of this kind of stuff in it. You know, there's a few bits and pieces of what's your one thing. What's the most important thing you'd be doing now today. Anyway, I got that and I've developed it and found it really useful. Just in the last week, actually, I was working with this incredible man, Rob Peckin, who started this just powerhouse visionary. He's like a positivity bulldozer, and he's making the impossible possible daily with his beautiful partner Emma, and this amazing team, this group called Food Connect. And I've been working with them, introducing them to holistic decision making and context, and shared the crystal ball rubber ball thing, where the idea is, there's other stuff in your life. Some of them are rubber balls. You can drop them and they'll bounce. And then actually, when I did this once in a workshop, I let it bounce and I just didn't catch it. And eventually it stopped, but I could get it bouncing again. And often these have to do with work and creative outlets. And then there's the crystal balls, which is the stuff that if you drop it, it'll break, it'll crack, and at some point it'll shatter. And so your own personal health and the quality of your intimate relationships, family and your closest friends. And when push comes to shove, the idea that if you've got to drop something, drop the rubber ball, hold on to the crystal balls. Actually, I finished the workshop yesterday. I had a rubber ball. I talked about that. And so this is, you can drop it and it'll bounce back. It's quite cool, because as if you let go of it for a little while and it bounces several times, each bounce is a little bit lower. It's going down. Your business is falling apart or whatever. And the longer you leave it, as long as it's still bouncing, you can start bouncing it back up again, but it takes more energy to get it back where it was, to the point where if it stops, and collapses, it takes a lot of energy. That said, often you can get it back up again. Some cases, of course, you can't. But anyway, I then grabbed a handful of teaspoons. We're in a cafe and said, close your eyes, this is what it sounds like when you drop a crystal ball. And I want you to remember the sound of this. And I want the sound of this to strike terror into your heart every time in the future of your life you're about to make a decision that's going to directly negatively impact your health or your intimate relationships. You know, hear the sound. But anyway, Rob, he came away from first hearing about this and said, I've realized that I've made Food Connect, my baby that I created, this incredible organization. That's me. It was my baby. It's a crystal ball. But until I can transform that into the rubber ball it really is, then my real crystal balls are going to be at risk. My relationship with my close people, my own health. And then another side for him was that as long as he was defining it as a crystal ball in the way he lived, it made it harder for others to get involved in the bounce. It's hard to let go of a crystal ball. And if you're treating your business as a crystal ball, or your farm, the whole succession issue. Whereas realizing that it's a rubber ball makes it, it's easier to hand someone else a rubber ball than it is a crystal ball. So yeah. Thanks for acknowledging that. And isn't it useful? So simple when people get it straight away. And now I've shared with you in the past. Sometimes you help people set up context or hone in on what quality of life means for them individually as a person, for their marriage, for their family, maybe for their business. And now you've got all these different sets of quality of life statements, and you go back to living life, and it's like, hang on, how do I kind of balance these, or how do I honor all of these simultaneously? Because that sometimes, even when you've done that work, you can still fall into the same rut of I'm experiencing quality of life in the business, but this week the family's taken a hit, or vice versa. How does that work? So I've developed this day planner where at the start of the weekend day planner, you choose what are the things in your life that you're part of, are you going to progress this week? And I'm bringing that layer to it now. So every week, every day, what are your crystal balls? What are your rubber balls? How are you going to progress them? So it's just constantly there. And that's been a real evolution for me, because I was in the same boat with Very Edible Gardens. I was a workaholic. I was addicted to urgency. I was chasing goals and solving problems. And we created this thing out, brought it out of the dust, and it became our master, and we were its servants, and we used holistic management and now what I'm calling decision making to turn it around and all that. It became something that was in service of quality of life, but it was a crystal ball for me, and I had to learn for it to become a rubber ball. And how that's been showing up for me lately with all my other work projects, all my other rubber balls, is that my wife's studying midwifery for the first time. She's been primarily a mum for several years. We've got little kids, and that's been our choice, and that's felt good for all of us. And but she's had this craving for a vocational outlet outside the family, and now she's achieving that. And she's had a belief or a fear, or which in the past has been well founded, that when push comes to shove, I'll make a decision that will prioritize, the business or this project or that project. And it'll deprioritize or mean that she has to put off a lecture or study or something like that. But because of this work, I'm so crystal clear in myself I'm crystal clear about my crystal balls are, that it's just a great feeling. So the moment she'll, every few weeks or whatever, something will come up that she wasn't aware of, that it's an opportunity for her to progress her studies, which, which is inside our relationship, and the fact that I'm supporting her to do this stuff. And helping create the space. And in that moment, if I've got something booked, a work thing, or even whatever, something that seems important in the past, to be, oh no, I'm sorry, my love, we're just going to have to shape our lives to honor this, whatever it is, this job. I'll say, give me a second, make the call. Sorry, I can't make it. It's not happening. And for her it's taken a while for that to arrive, and for that fear or belief of hers to fracture and break, to realize, oh wow, Dan gets it. I come first, my stuff comes first. And for me to have that clarity too, I don't need to think about it. The crystal balls come first. It's been incredibly helpful.
I think I'm going to make the bumper sticker and send it to you. You can throw it on your car. You can throw it on the bicycle. Crystal balls come first, which I think will make a lot of people think that we're just for fortune tellers. It'll be a whole new fad.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. Come and look into my crystal ball.
Crystal balls come first.
I'll tell you what quality of life is for you.
Exactly.
That is one aspect. Something you said earlier that I was meaning to mention this, which I love about this work, which is define quality of life. But you define it in your own terms. You know what it means for you. It's 100% yours. Like you describe the most fulfilling, amazing, life-filled life that you can look back on with the least regret possible on your own terms. You know, it's 100% yours, and now make decisions toward it. Like it's a pretty hard proposition to kind of see a crack or a flaw in, right? It's like, okay, so define what's supremely important in life for me, and then make decisions that take me into that space. Right? Yeah, that seems like a good idea. I want to learn more about that. And that's the essence of what it is, right? That's another bumper sticker. Our bumper is going to be covered in stickers by the end of this conversation.
Well, I think that's what cars were for. You know, just
totally. Yeah, why stop with the bumper? Just cover the whole damn car with stickers. Yeah.
The idea of decisions being hung up on the filter is something that I've really enjoyed, because I worked briefly in education when it came to wastewater treatment and potable water treatment at a municipal level. And the idea of filtration, the idea of disallowing elements that affected the total quality of the material going through was so fascinating, because I had a visceral experience of it. Our office was at the wastewater treatment plant in Edmonton, Alberta. Fantastic, like world famous gold bar wastewater treatment plant. Folks come from all over the world to see it because of how they work and why they work. But that conversation of disallowing, of via negativa, design by exclusion, is something that we're not very well primed for in a culture that bases itself on accumulation, on consumerism, of all the rest of it. I think it's where minimalism really comes from. But if you would, in what I've done, I've taken my own desire for minimalism and applied it to the mental space. And I got to tell you, minimalism as a mental space, far more valuable than minimalism as I just want to have a little bit of stuff. Because if you have it as a mentality, as I've been playing with it for the last couple of years, I really do come down to only a few elements, issues, things that I'm working on. And I have no problem allowing the number. And, you know, if we looked at the toy box, there's a ton of rubber balls in it for me, like just a number of them. And there's a lot of them I can pick back up. A lot of them I can play with, but they don't necessarily, the act of using them, the act of juggling, the act of whatever, doesn't necessarily increase quality of life. And I think that's where I get so excited about context, speaking about it, riffing with it with individuals. Because when you have the ability to have all these decisions filter down through your context in terms of how are we going to live on the road or in a place that's not home, when a decision gets hung up on a quality of life and the inquiry happens, not only, okay, well, then let's toss it out, but a further conversation of why. The education about that in terms of the context itself, about the individuals and about what that's about, I tell you, I've learned so much about clientele and so much about my own relationship when I ask why that's an issue. I understand the background of a person and how they operate to the point to where you can become, you can perform these pre-mortems versus post-mortems. You can understand why they'll be dead on arrival, and then encourage the conditions to allow for more life, period.
Yeah.
Right? I call context work the only self-honing tool I know of, because as you're using it, it sharpens its own edge. And one of the ways I've described context is a ruthless clarity of vision that literally cuts away the deadwood, cuts away the pieces that aren't necessarily helping the whole. I'm aware that we're rounding the bend at an hour, and you and I could literally talk for another day straight, and we'd probably be like, okay, I need a bio break or whatever, and we'd still be stoked to keep talking. So I don't know how we want to end this. Do you have a sense of a question or a statement or something that we could either put back to people who are who are listening or watching, or to ourselves? A nice way to encapsulate this?
Nothing's coming up. Yeah, my inclination was to reply to what you just said, and then you reply to what and like you said,
Yeah.
we go. I did want to thank you for that pre-mortem idea. I used that. It's great.
Oh, yeah.
Rather than assuming this idea or this decision we're about to make, or this action, is alive and beautiful because it's our idea and it's going to thrive. Like, let's try and find out whether let's assume that it could be dead. And if so, we want to know it's dead. So let's crash test it and try and break it, try and find out that it is dead and do that pre-mortem to save time on spinning. Because often otherwise we spend a lot of time on the post-mortem. So it wasn't such a good idea after all. But yes, thanks for that. Wrapping it up, Javan. A question. Anything coming up for you?
I think either wrapping up with a sense of a story or a value of why context has been important for us might give it.
That sounds good.
Conversation to kind of encapsulate it, or leave people with a sense of what they took away from this, or if that idea of quality of life over goals has been of value, or to say, where has that happened to you in your life? That's something I do a lot in workshops, where I say, now that you know this, usually between breaks, I want you to think of a time in your life where goals were over quality of life and what the result was. And also when quality of life was over goals. This almost always breaks people, because they come back and they go, I've never lived my life where quality of life is over goals. And if you want to get a room full of people, about 25% of them, to be really emotional, break down, and have to be in the weeds with them, great question to ask.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
If you're working with populations at risk, not a great question to ask from experience. Don't do that. But I would say I would leave that for folks in the comment section below. When is the time that you had quality of life over goals and goals over quality of life, and what was the result? And then for yourself, maybe a personal story about where this has landed really well for you and has created a lot of benefit.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, I'll just flesh that question out a bit, then I'll speak to that second bit. Yeah, a related question, or expanding it, would be, take a look at today and tomorrow, and then maybe we'll look back at the week you've just had, but look at your life now, and just playfully ask that question: how many of my waking hours am I spending chasing goals and solving problems? And to what extent has that been a bit of a kind of a default life strategy of mine? And to what extent does it feel like that's working out? And to what extent does it feel like an interesting invitation, or something that I've already done, or I'm already doing, and that, so this is affirming or resonating, or comment sharing some of my discoveries? But yeah, there's possibility of turning it around and saying, don't necessarily shelve goals and problems and go straight to quality of life. You can do that, but to what extent could I ask my goals and problems to tell me some secrets about what quality of life is for me, and then flip the whole thing around, so quality of life comes first. I use that to choose the goals and get rid of that serve quality of life, get rid of the goals that don't, and then approach problems where I reframe them as opportunities for traction. Because it doesn't matter what the problem is, within every single problem all of us face, even if it's a whisker, there's a whisker of possibility there in terms of traction toward quality of life.
I think that's it, Dan. I think you just completed our video chat. That was beautiful.
Beautiful. Got off the hook with the story. I feel the same. Yeah, it's a great place.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for the conversation. I know it's something that I look forward to on the weeks that we're able to make it. And for folks that are watching, if this was something you enjoyed, if this is something you want to see more of, feel free to let us know. I know a lot of you have listened to me on the Permaculture Voices Turn Creative Destruction podcast with Diego Footer and gotten a lot of value out of that. And if you're interested in more of this sort of video conversation, either with Dan or other people, let us know below. And I'm sure Dan and I can have our very rubber arms on this topic twisted to do more of this. But, Dan, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, always a pleasure, Javan. Thanks for existing. It was great to find you doing this kind of work and deep questioning and in particular honoring this beautiful thing that Allan Savory created and honoring it by improving it. Well, not necessarily improving it, but adapting it and exploring it and finding ways of making it more accessible, which is something that I've obviously been doing myself. It was so great to find a comrade working in that space. So good on you.
Yeah,
keep it up.
right back at you. And again, a huge thank you to Allan Savory for his work within
Mm.
holistic management and holistic
Thanks, Allan.
context. Created a brilliant conversation, and he's adapted it. I know his new edition of his book is even better than the second and the first. Highly recommend people check into his work, check into the Savory Institute. Yeah, thanks so much, everybody. This has been fantastic. I love speaking about this work. This is the work that ignites me more than anything else these days. And I'll leave you with what I say when speaking about this, is that if you don't design your life, somebody else will design it for you, and it won't be for your benefit. It'll be for theirs. So take the time, open up the hood of your life, really take a look at all the elements, see where life has been designed for you and where you can start to design it for yourself, because it's always a good time to design. Thanks so much for your time, everybody. If you enjoyed this video, do the thumbs up, do the like, do the subscribe, do the bell, because YouTube likes making things frustrating. And hopefully we'll talk to you again next time. Thanks so much, everybody.